Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Off the Cuff. My name is Fred,
I'm Brian.
and we have a whole lot of stupid and crazy stuff for you today. So this is a
We're going to
mess.
be talking. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about sovereign citizens, one of my favorite subjects. I personally have not had any experience with them so far, but as before we started, Fred, you were telling me you had some experience.
Yeah, I think it's something we can touch on as we go, because once we start delving into it, we can explain some of it using experiences. But these people, by and large, are they're nuts, just flat out. There's no other way to put it. These people are off the reservation somewhere. So
They made up their own laws.
So for those that are not familiar with sovereign citizens, this is nothing really new to law enforcement, but a lot of the public at large, I'm sure you've seen, some people have maybe seen it in passing on, YouTube and social media, but just to give a brief definition, according to the Oxford Dictionary, what a sovereign citizen is it's a member of a political movement of people who oppose taxation. They question the legitimacy of government and believe that they are not subject to the law. And I think some of us on certain parts of the spectrum can get behind that first part a little bit. Maybe not necessarily oppose taxation, but maybe abuses of taxation. But then it goes down the rabbit hole real fast. They question the legitimacy of the government, and they feel like they're not subject to the laws of the land, which is where it gets real hairy. And we're going to get into some of that, how this is, there's kind of a goofy side to this, some of the nonsense that they do, and there's some pretty dangerous side to these people too. So we'll let Brian get into it. He's got a questionnaire. This is the first that I had ever heard of the questionnaire. When you brought it up, I'd never seen this before, thankfully, but this is some nonsense.
Yeah, so I was just on YouTube scrolling for sovereign citizens, and I came across this guy. I was like, hey, I need you to fill out this questionnaire before I'll give you any information or let you ask any questions. I'm like, what? I've never heard this. I've heard, I'm traveling, not driving. I've heard, we're all boat pirates, and, they're in their vessel and shit like that. But, it's not true. They think that they can make their own laws. There's even one funny one out there where the guy has the earth is flat behind his car, and the sergeant goes up to him and explains that the earth is actually, a globe. But yeah, I mean, there's some funny stuff, especially for anybody can get behind. Law enforcement probably enjoys it a little bit more since we're not in that situation.
Well, just so you know too, if you Google or YouTube search for sovereign citizens, there is a plethora. There is a cornucopia of videos of them being tased and dog bit and all kinds of other stuff because they don't comply with instructions. Oh yeah, so that's homework for your own time. But this questionnaire is insane.
Yeah, and I thought I was only going to find one, but I ended up finding, I think, like 2 or 3 videos of people using this questionnaire, and I looked at it, I'm like, what? This makes no sense, because I started researching some of the statutes they quote, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But first, we're going to go ahead and let you see the video I first saw when figuring out that they had a questionnaire now for public servants.
So yeah, there's going to actually be 2 videos. The first one's going to be a little short, but we'll grab the first, put them back to back so you can kind of get a feel for what's going on with these things, and we'll delve into the questionnaire a little more so you can see how absurd this is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was your name and badge number again?
Carter.
Okay, can you please fill this out?
I'm not filling it out.
It's called the Public Servant Questionnaire.
I'm not filling it out.
And you're a sheriff?
Yes.
Well, I'm fine. I don't need any help. So, and your badge number again was?
1891.
Yes, 1891. Will you please fill that out?
I'm not filling that out.
Okay, well, I'm fine. I don't need your help. I've already been told I'm allowed to stay here.
Okay,
so.
no, that's okay.
And I wasn't yelling.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're cool otherwise?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Alrighty.
Fill us out, please don't answer questions. I don't answer questions. Can you please fill us out before I do answer questions? I need you to fill us out. I'm private. I need you to fill us out.
What does that mean?
I'm private. I need you to fill us out first before I answer any questions. All right, thank you, sir. Hey, you know Chuck Messos, Sheriff? He actually pulled me over the other day. I have it on video. All right? So just letting you know. All right? I've dealt with this before. Now, I need you to fill this out first, sir. I need you to. All right, I didn't say that, but I'm just letting you know I've dealt with this before. Okay? So, no, I need you. Do you want to see the video? I need you to fill this out. Here, right here, this. Here you go. All right. All right. Well, listen. I need you to fill it. I don't answer questions. I don't answer questions.
Can you step out of the video?
No, I cannot. If you want, call your supervisor, please. Call the supervisor.
No, but you're going to get arrested. If you
Call
don't
the
identify
supervisor.
yourself, okay?
Call the supervisor.
Okay, I got you.
Can you call the supervisor,
Can
please?
you identify yourself so I can tell them who I'm talking with first?
I'm private.
What's your name?
I'm private.
You're private?
Yes. Can you please fill this out first,
Have
sir?
you been arrested for this before?
No, as I said, I've been pulled over by the sheriff himself who let me go because I'm private.
I'm not a sheriff.
All right, but I'm just saying sheriff is higher than you.
But this isn't even rocket
I know, but I'm just saying.
I
So call,
understand
if you
your-
want, call the
Can I
sheriff.
talk for a second?
Call,
I understand that your political views are that sheriff are higher than police officers.
I know, but I don't answer questions. I need you to fill this out first.
Here.
All right, thank you, sir. I'm just going right here. Right here. I'm traveling. I'm traveling, not driving.
A few moments later.
But I'm traveling right now in my private conveyance.
You don't want disobeying on top
I'm
of that.
traveling, guys.
Put your
Guys.
hands behind your back.
Can I put my phone in my pocket?
There you go.
All right, so we just watched two interesting videos. The first guy actually did comply, and the other one, it didn't seem like there was a reason to arrest the female in that situation, because it doesn't even sound like it was a traffic. It definitely wasn't a traffic stop. And
It sounded more like it was either a well-being check or it was a
yeah.
consensual encounter where she basically, I mean, the video is entitled Deputy or Sheriff Gets Owned. And like you said, you know, when we were watching it together before, I mean, these people really need to, you know, use a dictionary. I don't know that I would classify that as owned. You asked him to fill out a questionnaire and he said no, and you told him you were fine and he left. So I don't.
And then he still asked you questions, which you did answer without that questionnaire being filled out. So
The second guy, I mean, in reality, that you can't engage these people too much, but that's further into the discussion. But so this questionnaire, I'll let you get started with it since you're the one that found this thing.
So what you're going to see up on your screen right now, it's notice to all public officials. The bearer of this card hereby lawfully notifies you that you are commercially liable for any violation of his or her rights. And the bearer, and then it goes on to a whole bunch of things to list the, you know, number 3 is will not answer any questions without a public servant questionnaire pursuant to Privacy Act of 1974, U.S. Code Section 88, established, you know, in 1974. And then you go down and, you know, there's talk about, there's a P. If you violate this person's right, you have to pay them 20 ounces of 0.99 gold or the equivalent of that.
999 thousandths gold. Like,
yeah.
what a random, stupid currency that you're going to decide that you're owed for violation of this. But this is just this is where the rabbit hole starts. These people are crazy, like Looney Tunes.
I mean, obviously we didn't go into like all the full number 4 where it lists like equal protection under law, which Title 482, which I mean we deal with every day, and it really doesn't matter. But
well, you know, it outlines that they will not consent to a search. They will not answer any questions, as you said. You know, basically, we reserve all religious, constitutional, civil, human rights. Like they go on these soapbox tangents and everything that they do. You can peg out a sovereign citizen from a mile away because they go into these soapbox tangents with everything. So,
I'm not driving. I'm traveling. This is not a this is my personal property. I'm operating on the roadway. You you know, just a list of excuses.
They
trying
play
to
word games with
play
everything.
word games, yeah.
And their goal
And-
really is to try and trip up the police officers or the deputy sheriffs or troopers to try and get them twisted around. So they say stupid things or they make mistakes or you get intimidated because they start throwing these U.S. codes at you. And, you know, we deal with, you know, state level codes or statutes or whatever the specific state is. And we deal with that stuff on a daily basis. And yeah, you got to know the basic rights, you know, don't violate these people's rights, but they start throwing these big US codes around and people panic. They're not used to dealing with this stuff on a daily basis. So they freak out. But if you take 2 seconds to research this stuff, I mean, there's so many holes in everything that they spew on here. If we get to the questionnaire over here, it's a pretty ridiculous. So the whole basis to this questionnaire is that they put it under the Privacy Act, which is the USC section 5. It says 553A on here, but as we went through and we researched everything, this is actually misprinted. It's actually under 552A. And that's where the Privacy Act of 1974 is under. And it basically outlines that you are required as a citizen of the United States that no government entity can keep information that those agencies have against you private. So, you know, if the police departments or the federal government, if they have things identifying you, if, you know, your arrest records, anything that can be used, information against you, it has to be made legally accessible to you, which it is. So they have this questionnaire here as you're reading through it. It identifies that they are a private man or woman, which I don't know what that means, but this questionnaire requires that the public servant provide their full legal name, their residential address, the agency they work for, their supervisor's name and address, asks if you're going to uphold the Constitution, your state ID and badge number. I mean, all these questions about furnishing requests for these reports and everything. And we'll link to this thing so you can read it. I mean, it is as Looney Tunes as it looks. Yeah, it really is. But they stick this in your face because they think they know that you're not going to sign it. They as a law enforcement officer, they know you're not going to sign it. And they know that they think that this is a shield. This is a safeguard against legal obligation. And it's nonsense. It's garbage. And the problem is, and as we were doing our research, as we were digging through, so the Privacy Act specifically tells you that there's 12 exemptions in which the agencies of the federal government and so forth, they don't have to make that information available to you, or they don't have to notify you. So the point is you have to be notified. So if I, as a law enforcement officer, if a government agency shares the information, they have to notify you either written or in person or phone call or whatever. There are 12 exemptions in which I am not required, or an agency is not required to notify you. And one of the 12 is if I'm sharing it with another law enforcement agency for law enforcement purposes. And that's one of the questions on the questionnaire specifically is what other agencies is this going to be shared with? But just like anything else, they pick and choose and they cherry pick. They cherry pick sections of US codes that sound scary and sound terrifying to people that have no experience with it. And they just throw it in your face and you panic. Yeah. So
obviously don't engage with these people because there is a dangerous side to sovereign citizens, but if you're dealing with somebody like you saw in the video, you don't have to fill out this stupid form. Don't get intimidated if they're like, oh yeah, well, according to US code section or article 5 United States Code section 553A, you can't do this. Just because they're quoting statute doesn't mean they know what, obviously they don't know what they're doing or even saying. They get these things off of a website that, freedomfromthegovernment.org, or, I've seen a whole bunch of other websites out there that'll sell stuff just like this, just to make a quick buck, and then someone else is just going to get arrested because the cop's going to look at that, and if they don't comply, they'll bash out their window. and drag them out.
Well, and that's the thing is as law enforcement, you just have to be smart enough. Like, knowledge is power, and I've been stressed to this. This has been stressed to me for over a decade of this job. Knowledge is power, and yeah, being physically fit's important. Being able to do this, being able to do that, that's all important. But the knowledge is key, man. There are so many situations you can get yourself out of by just knowing your job, knowing what you're allowed to do, and making smart decisions. These people, they're not smart. They throw out a bunch of big flashy words and codes and statutes and all that, and but again, they cherry pick. They take the little sliver that out of context sounds like it proves their point, but when you look at the bigger picture, it's all garbage. It's all absolute garbage. Like, for example, the one that you keep bringing up, which is the one you hear the most, is you will pull a car over and you have a sovereign citizen driving, and you're like, I'm not driving, I'm traveling. And if you see that guy in the second video that we play, the one on the traffic stop, it takes him a minute, but when we were watching it together, I'm like, oh, there it is. There's the one. It gets thrown out there a lot. And the problem is they like to play word games. They like to wordsmith things like that to try and get around the reality and try to make their point valid. But traveling, there's a distinction. Actually, you looked it up. I don't know if you still have it, but there's a distinction in the US code, a distinction between traveling and driving, because there's become such an issue with this. But right here, just in a little bit of researching, we found there's a website called Beg No Pardon, and it's a sovereign citizen website. It's an anti-law enforcement, anti-government website. And their big thing here is, and this is what they do, they use court cases to try and tear things apart. So Shapiro versus Thompson, 394 US 618 says all citizens must be free to travel throughout the United States uninhibited by statutes, rules, and regulations. And then it goes on to say, in Thompson versus Smith, it goes on to say the right of the citizen to travel upon public highways and to transport his property thereon, either by a horse-drawn carriage or by automobile, is not a mere privilege which the city may prohibit at will, but it is a common right. So these are things that, then they go on to define a motor vehicle. And under USC Title 18, it defines a motor vehicle as, it means every description of carriage or other contrivance, propelled or drawn by mechanical power and used for commercial purposes, and they highlight commercial purposes, on the highways in the transportation of passengers and property or cargo. Then it goes on to define commercial purposes as any fare, fee, rate, charge, or other consideration, or directly, indirectly, in connection with any business. So we discussed this. U.S. code, obviously, the U.S. roadways, like the actual U.S. roadways, they're primarily used for commercial transportation, big rigs, transporting goods across the country. And that's why these things are labeled the way that they are. And what most people don't understand is that the states are in charge of their own rules and regulations. There are some overarching laws that everybody has to follow. And the states are in charge of they're in charge of regulating the roadways, they're in charge of enforcing their laws, so on and so forth. So when these states, these counties, and these cities, they make laws, they are allowed to be more strict than the federal laws. They are not allowed to be more lenient, which is for another conversation. This is where things got messy with the whole legalization of marijuana and stuff like that.
And then they, what was it? Sanctuary cities.
Yep. So
for immigration and firearms. So it's not just a left or left thing. It's also a right thing, where some states have said we're, sanctuary city for firearm laws. So the states can be more lenient, but they can be more strict, but they can't be more lenient. So we actually went, and because of this, because the U.S. code does not mention any private, or everything that's mentioned is commercial. So we went and we dove into the actual statutes and codes of specific states.
we looked up Texas, Florida, California, and New York because, you know, those are pretty good definitions of conservative and liberal. So we have both sides of it. So I took Florida and I took California. So a motor vehicle in Florida is defined as an automobile, motorcycle, truck, trailer, semi-trailer, truck, tractor, and semi-trailer combination, or any other vehicle operated on the roads of the state used to transport persons or property and propelled by power other than muscular power. But the term does not include tractor engines, and it goes on to talk about, you know, farm equipment and whatnot. So right there, it already spits in the face of, you know, what these people are trying to use a U.S. code that is designated. The whole purpose of it is to regulate what the U.S. highways are mostly used for, is transporting goods, and that's what their regulation and that's what they're looking for. So this already spits in the face in it. But Florida's pretty conservative, so let's go with California because I don't think anybody would debate it. It's pretty liberal. It's actually even more short and sweet. California defines a motor vehicle as a vehicle that is self-propelled. I mean, a motor vehicle does not include self-propelled wheelchairs, motorized tricycles, motorized quadricycles, and if operated by a person, as long as it's operated by a person by reason of physical disability, could not move around without those things. So any self-propelled vehicle in California is considered a motor vehicle. So you had Texas and New York, right?
Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with the blue state, New York. And this is their definition. Every vehicle operated or driven upon a public highway, which is propelled by any power other than muscular power, and then goes into the same exceptions, you know, people driving their or motorized scooters or anything like that.
So kind of a mix of California and Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of like that. And Texas, they describe it as any motor driven or propelled vehicle required to be registered under law of the state. And then obviously it goes on to trucks, semi-trucks, and trailers and other stuff like that. But regardless of what state you go to, because you're going to end up hitting a state, each state has their own definition, which is pretty much the same for motor vehicles.
Basically,
So,
yeah. I mean, a motorized vehicle, you know, there are certain states have certain exceptions for like motorized scooters and motorized bikes and stuff like that, ATVs, golf carts, things like that. They all have exceptions, and you can get into it and delve deeper into the statutes. But the reality is, you know, this is what they do, though. They cherry pick things that are vague, that don't necessarily that don't really apply to everyday life, but they try to take that and tweak it to make it fit what they're doing. And the things that they do are ridiculous. I mean, you're talking about driving with no license, you know, and all the, like they trespass on places, they go into government buildings and cause shenanigans, all kinds of nonsense. I mean, this is becoming a huge problem because it's not just little annoyances like, yeah, driving without a license. Obviously licenses are important because, you know, their argument is, oh, I have a right to travel. Okay, well, the states are obligated to ensure that the people of the state are safe. Someone that has shown that they don't have the ability to drive safely has their license removed, and that's there for good reason. So I'm just kind of combing through and I'm looking for, so one of the things that they used as well, one of the definitions that they used, or one of the nonsensical things that they went through, they were just pulling bits and pieces from this. One of the sentences that they used, I think it was section 5, the right of the citizens to travel upon the public highways and to transport his property thereon in the ordinary course of life and business is a common right which he has under his right to enjoy life and liberty. You know, and it goes on to say the right is not a mere privilege which a city may permit or prohibit. So that is section 5 of Thompson versus Smith, which is one of the key. It's a Supreme Court of Virginia case that is one of the key things that they talk about in here, and all these nonsensical things. And the problem is that's section 5 of the syllabus for the court case. But you go through and section 1, section 2, section 3, section 4, everything before that articulates very, very clearly that the chief of police of a specific city, county, or person, the head honcho in charge of law enforcement for the state, has an obligation, not just a right, it has an obligation for the issuance and revocation of permits for driving. So they go all the way down to Section 5, where they can pick out little pieces of information that make it sound like they're doing what, my God-given right. But then they ignore sections 1 through 4, where it specifically outlines in that court case that the police are expected to enforce traffic rules and licenses. And most states, the revocation and stuff like that usually goes to a DMV or some equivalent tax collector's office, something like that. But law enforcement is in charge of monitoring and going after bad licenses, because, if it's not hard to get it's really not hard to get a license, especially in some of these states. It is not hard. It is not hard. So if you're driving so poorly that your license gets revoked or suspended or canceled or whatever, you probably shouldn't be driving. And on top of that, half these boneheads don't have insurance. So they break your car, they break your car.
Yeah, and then you're stuck with the bill.
And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So one of the articles that you found was from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And it was, they call it paper terrorism, which this is where it gets a little scary. Like, this is the first layer of the onion that gets really scary, because when you get violence is one thing, but this is something different. Go ahead.
Exactly. And it's always fun to laugh at these people, but I mean, this is just, like he said, what we're about to explain was just going to be the first layer of what they will go to, because they have this idea that they're above the law, and any law enforcement doesn't have any right to stop them or whatever unless they're committing a crime. So
we have a situation here in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, on Independence Day in 2015. There was an incident in which a 65-year-old sovereign citizen by the name of Lee Harold Cromwell, as quoted in the article, he rammed his truck into a crowd of people at a 4th of July fireworks show. And according to witnesses, he accelerated backwards, hitting 8 vehicles and injuring 12 individuals, including James Robinson, who died from his injuries. 3 adults and 6 children with non-life-threatening conditions were taken to the hospital. So he remained in his vehicle. This is the arrogance of these people. He remained in his vehicle after the accident, talking on his cell phone until a police officer came to question him. When asked for his driver's license, Cromwell told the officer he had returned it to the state because he didn't need it. And the reason why should have been warning enough to the officers, obviously, because what happens when someone, just normal people that aren't sovereign citizens, when you pull them over and they're like, oh, I don't have my license, and they get all nervous like that, like, what's that usually mean? They don't have it because they don't have a license, or because the police took it because it was suspended. That's every single time. So when you say, I returned it to the state because I don't need it, that means his license is hot garbage. That means that it's a mess, and this is about to get squirrely quickly. So turned out his license was suspended, shocker, the year prior in 2014, after he challenged a speeding ticket by sending the court a dollar bill and a letter titled affidavit and denial of corporate existence. In the letter, he referred to himself as Lee Harold of the family Cromwell. So this is the nonsensical Looney Tunes, outer space nonsense that they come up with, and he also entitled himself as Living Man with a Conscience. And he said he denied the corporate existence of the country, state, and various government agencies. So he was arrested the next day and charged with 1 count of vehicular manslaughter and 8 counts of aggravated assault, but not before creating a commotion among the Anderson County's legal and law enforcement communities. And this is where it gets terrifying. This is why they call it paper terrorism, and this is the stuff that's important, because it doesn't just affect law enforcement officers. You piss off some of these people because you bumped into them at the grocery store and you cursed at them because they took your parking spot. And this is the kind of this is the kind of nonsense they come up with. So during Cromwell's trial, he filed an $8 million lien against Donald Elledge, who was the criminal court judge assigned to the case. Elledge then recused himself Then Dave Clark, the district attorney for Anderson County, was forcefully recused by the judge's replacement, Judge Paul Summers, after Cromwell filed a frivolous lien against him. So Cromwell also filed liens against the arresting officer, Oak Ridge's chief of police, another prosecutor in the district attorney's office, and the circuit court clerk for Anderson County. So this is what they do, and this is why it's called paper terrorism, is when you upset these people or when you go against them, when you try to force them to live by the laws of the land they don't recognize, they go after you. They put liens on your homes. They put liens on everything, your cars, anything that they can get a lien attached to. And it damages your well-being in your life. Like you decide you want to, sell your house. You can't, because there's a $250,000 lien on it by this bonehead. And, governments are taking steps to try and combat this. But it's tough, because at least for us, the way things are now, if you can tie their frivolous liens to some sort of action taken against law enforcement or government agency to try and, if we can show that it was vindictive because we were doing the course of our duties, that there's charges for that. But people, like everyday people, man, it's a mess. Like if they were to go and put a lien on, somebody watching's mother, like, that's tough. You got to battle that out in the courts. You got to fight with the credit bureaus. It's a mess, and they use it to strong arm because they can.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in that scenario, he strong armed the judge and in the prosecuting attorney.
Yeah, you had to force a whole new judge, force a whole new prosecuting attorney. I mean, and these people are pushing the limits, and they're going after people, and that's their number one weapon in their arsenal, is to come after your well-being, your livelihood. It's and then this goes on to say that the liens are typically filed by individuals or businesses that are unable to collect on a genuine debt. Liens can force the sale of property in order to satisfy the debt, or alternately prevent an owner from selling their property until the issue is resolved. The removal of a lien is a complicated process that often takes the work of attorneys and a year or more before it is successfully discharged, and can ruin someone's credit in the interim. Some victims have gone bankrupt as a result of these actions. And it's frustrating that there's not more that's done to these people when they do these frivolous lawsuits. It says, in addition to the liens, sovereign citizens also file bogus lawsuits against people they perceive as enemies, falsely reporting their foes to the IRS for failing to disclose all of their income, and file fabricated criminal charges against them. Now, some of those things, depending on the circumstances, obviously filing a false report of a crime is a crime. So, but it all depends on the circumstances. I mean, it doesn't take much, and I've seen it in action. It doesn't take much for someone to go, so-and-so did this to a child, and that child goes to the school and tells a teacher, and then the teacher reports it about this person. And then all of a sudden it's like the person who made the allegation didn't actually come in and make the allegation, so they're not really liable. And it turns into a mess. And these people know how to play the games, man. They know how to play games.
Yeah.
So just some examples. In 2013, a Department of Corrections commissioner in Minnesota was forced into personal bankruptcy court by a sovereign citizen with an axe to grind. In 2016, an Idaho Department of Transportation worker was taken to court and sued for over $6 million for refusing to reinstate the license of a sovereign citizen with no auto insurance, which, most people should be aware by now that auto insurance is required to keep your license valid. Otherwise, they suspend it. In 2017, a group of anti-government individuals in Colorado, calling themselves a People's Grand Jury, sought to influence specific cases by threatening to file liens and criminal complaints against public servants unless they dismissed the cases or resigned. The Quall family of Nolensville, Tennessee, was terrorized by sovereign citizens after they bought a property belonging to the sovereign citizen's mother. The sovereign citizen, who was Leighton Ward, claimed the family was trespassing. He filed a judgment against the property, claiming the sale was improper. Despite his preposterous allegations, his claim is legally attached to their property title and can negatively affect them if they decide to sell the house. So this is the nonsense that these people go through. And these people, they legitimately, and being a Christian guy myself, I'm all about, God, and, that's the only person that I truly deeply have to answer to and stuff. But I mean, you can usually peg a sovereign citizen from a mile away, because they'll say things, like I said, they get very preachy, very soapboxy, they get very confrontational. The last time I was out with a sovereign citizen, I was actually off duty. They tried to run over, like they tried to take an action, and they almost ran over a motorcycle, and they were brake checking me and messing with me in my off-duty vehicle. And I flashed my badge at them just to like tell them, hey, listen, knock it off. Like, you don't know when there's a cop around. Like, you are actively messing with a cop right now. And I may be off duty, but as you know, we're never really off duty. So he ended up slamming on the brakes and stopping in the middle of the road and getting out and confronting me. And I called our local PD, and they showed up and they handled it. But like, the first thing out of his mouth was, "Oh, you think you're a big guy because you're a cop? Only God can judge me." That's their, they love that as much as, I'm traveling. Only God can judge me. Nope. There's a lot of people before God that can judge you. Trust me. Trust me. It's going to end poorly for you.
Yeah.
So they tend to be very closed off. They tend to be very sketchy and volatile. It's not just this paper terrorism and this nonsense. They get violent. They get violent. We've had a lot of instances with law enforcement and negative interactions with them over the years, and it's getting worse and worse. I haven't had an issue with them in a while, but where we work, we run into them. We still have issues with them. So
but
we did have a video for you. It's
and this is where it's going to take a little bit more of a darker turn with these sovereign citizens. Like I said before, and I can't stress this enough, it's fun to go look up videos on YouTube and laugh at these people, because just the mind games that they're trying to play. But they are a serious threat, either through paper terrorism or even violent action with firearms. So we're going to show you a video. We're going to cut. I don't think any part of it is graphic, so I don't think we have to cut it out. But still,
I think the actual shooting itself, like, you can see, the actual impact from the shooting is off screen. So
so it's just a few seconds, or 15, 20 seconds. You said was the
something like that. I think we cut out the frivolous stuff. I think it's anywhere between 20 and 40 seconds. Nothing crazy.
Yeah, and there's going to be no audio for some reason. This was back in, I believe, 2011. Was that correct?
2010, close. Yeah, somewhere around there.
Okay. So, just take the quality in mind that it's just 2010. This isn't 2021. So we're going to go ahead and show you the video now.
So to give you a little backstory on that thing, Officer Bill Evans was the one that stopped these two gentlemen. It's Brandon, is it Potter, I guess, and Bill Evans were the two officers. They stopped a minivan on Interstate 40 in West Memphis, Arkansas. The driver was a Jerry Kane. He had no driver's license. Imagine that. The car was not registered to him. He had drugs in his possession and outstanding warrants. So this is a common theme. As soon as they start giving you a hard time about the driver's license, there's usually more there, especially when they start spouting off some of the nonsense. As the officers were patting Kane down, the passenger leaned out the window and opened fire on Evans before exiting the vehicle and shooting Potter, the other officer, from behind, killing them both. The shooter was Jerry's 16-year-old son, Joseph. He and his father had been traveling around the country offering sovereign-laden seminars on how people could avoid foreclosures and were generally averse to the law. So they left the scene and were spotted a short while later at a Walmart where Jerry was attempting to remove the minivan's license plate. A gunfight ensued between law enforcement and the Canes. The two officers were wounded and the Canes were both killed. So after, it goes on to say that after Officer Potter's, I hope I'm not butchering that, after Officer Potter's murder, his father, who was the West Memphis chief of police, dedicated his life to promoting awareness of sovereign citizens and the potentially violent threat they pose to law enforcement and ordinary citizens. So, yeah, I mean, the paper terrorism is bad. That affects the paper terrorism is probably going to affect people like the average citizen more so than anything else. These people, the violence is real, and the violence is not just, these people hate law enforcement because it symbolizes the government that they don't recognize, but it goes so much further, and it goes, I mean, everyday average people are, you know, a hop, skip, and a jump away from having physical altercations and deadly altercations with these people. It's not just law enforcement.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate how it pursued, but I mean, the 16-year-old son was the one that was shooting the cops, and obviously that's just echoes, you know, situational awareness for cops and, you know, just good officer safety in general. Especially, you know, I didn't know about this case until researching it, but you wouldn't think a 16-year-old would just come out with a gun and start shooting you, especially during a traffic stop. So,
and it goes to show, you know, I mean, you know, there's a lot of flack between the community and law enforcement right now, and it goes in waves. But right now, people don't understand. You know, they say, "Oh, well, if you're so scared, why do you do this job? Like, you shouldn't be doing this job if you're so scared." You know, if you go to work every day and you don't know if you're going to come home alive or not, and you're not scared by that, you don't belong doing this job. Like, if you don't have that fear that something bad can happen to you, now obviously you have to manage that fear. But this is proof positive, and there's no shortage of this. This isn't like an isolated incident where we just plucked one out.
no, it's not.
I mean, this article alone has like 7 of them. It's not an isolated incident. It happens all the time. We didn't end up finding it, but we had one where that I had seen previously. It was another white windowless van. Imagine that. But it was like an Econoline, like Ford work van, and they got out with an AR-15 and just started spraying the police. You know, and you know, if people are going to go that far, to me, there is this line of decency, and there are a couple things, you know, murder that makes you, you know, that's a line of indecency. Once you cross, it's hard to come back from that. Crimes against children, you know, crimes against, you know, the disabled and the elderly, like those things are all, like attacking a cop, like a cop, law enforcement is the symbol of that line between the good people and the bad people, and that barrier. And a vast majority of criminals do not go the lengths of attacking law enforcement because they know there are severe consequences. Yeah. But there is that section of the public that they are, and not the good section, they are willing to, once you assault or attack or try to murder a police officer, there is no telling, like, if you're willing to go try to kill someone that is armed with a firearm and is there to protect themselves and everybody else in the community, and you know that a gun interaction with them could end up in you dying, and you still are willing to go that extra step and try to attack or kill a cop, like, when it comes to that person, pretty much nobody's safe. I mean, if you're willing to go after like law enforcement like that, you know, you bump into this guy in the wrong way in a bar and you could end up dead. Like, these are people that are not, they're not good people. And they cross that line on a daily basis that you just can't come back from. So, I mean, again, 2012, there was, you know, Brandon Nielsen and Jeremy Trish, the St. John the Baptist Parish Sheriff's Office. was an officer involved shooting there. This included Terry Smith and his two sons, Brian and Derek, and they got into a firefight with Deputy Mike Scott Boynton when they pulled over his car and gunned him down and took off. September 2012, Alamo, California, California Highway Patrol, another shooting involving sovereign citizens. I mean, June 8th, 2014, Las Vegas, Nevada, with the Las Vegas Metro Police Department, another shooting involving law. I mean, the list just keeps going and going and going and going. And these are people that they don't recognize the beliefs and the values that you have. They don't recognize the government that you have. They don't recognize it. And Brian and I have sat here, you know, we've got our beefs. We've got our beefs with Biden and Kamala Harris and, you know, the current government and stuff like that. We have issues with them, but neither of us is going to stand here and say, like, we don't believe in the government. We don't believe in the rules of the land. Like, we may not agree with all of the laws, but we agree with the order that society has to have. And this is nonsense. This is chaos. It really is. So if nothing else, you know, we're not here to give you the whole history of sovereign citizens and make you experts, but at least get you introduced into something that we think is interesting because it's terrifying sometimes. And sometimes
and
it's
other
funny.
times extremely funny. Yeah, extremely funny.
Watching these dudes eat carpet when they get tased in the courthouse. I mean, it's always a good time, but something that maybe, you know, enough people will go research a little bit or go watch some videos on YouTube and familiarize themselves with some of the key talking points and the key phrases so they can avoid issues for themselves and understand, you know, it's not giving anybody any slack or giving anybody any excuses, but this is just one of the many things that puts law enforcement on edge. And, you know, we have to be better than everybody else. We have to stay on top of our game. There's no excuses for us to do wrong or do bad, but we understand the stresses that regular people go through when they have to interact with law enforcement and understand the stresses that we have to go through. That's the whole point to this whole thing that we're doing here, is to humanize us and to help you see behind the curtain a little bit. And hopefully you get a chance to see where we're coming from on things and get a chance to understand, like, it's, you know, outside your little bubble of what, you know, you're 9 to 5, you go to work and you come home, you know, go to the bar, the clubs, and have a little bit of a good time and go to sporting events. Outside your little bubble, like, it's a crazy world out there sometimes. And thankfully half the people watching this probably don't ever have to deal with that. But this is the kind of stuff, like, I know Brian's into history, you know, like Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin and all that stuff, because all the whacked out crazy people, the violent crazy people, are interesting to try and pick their brains and figure out what was wrong with them. But this is not that these people, not that these people are Hitler or anything like that, but they're off the reservation. They're wackadoodles, and they're out there trying to hurt people and do bad things and get away with murder, literally. So if you have any interest, you know, this kind of stuff is interesting, and we figure at least, you know, put it on some people's radar so they can be aware. Yeah.
It's just that old phrase, I think, is from G.I. Joe, you know, knowing it's half the battle. So.
And now you know.
And now you know. Yep. So, I really enjoy doing sovereign citizens videos. We're going to try and do where we can, like, live react to this. We're still trying to get up to that point. So we're also trying to get to a point where we're in the same, like, studio or whatever. So we're not doing it through Zoom or Skype or whatever. And so that's why you need to like, subscribe, hit the notification button. Anything you want to add?
Just keep interacting. Like, listen, I know it's been a little bit since we got our last one up. It's been a crazy couple weeks with all the nonsense going on, and there's been a lot, but we appreciate the people. Like, every day I was actually surprised. Every day that I log into Facebook, I see, you know, Off the Cuff has a new like, has 3 new likes, 3 new follows and stuff like that. So we appreciate all the people jumping in and checking us out, and just keep doing what you're doing, and we'll keep doing what we're doing. We're going to try to get back at a little more steady with these things. It's been tough with Brian being on night shift and all the craziness we've had. There's been hurricanes going up the East Coast and all kinds of other stuff coming along. So it's been a mess. But
are we gonna be forced to go to Florida? Are we not gonna be forced to go to Florida or any other fucking state? Or,
one of our guys got one of our guys got deployed for the National Guard. So, my guys, so my shift is short and it screwed up my schedule a little bit. So, but we're gonna get back into trying to do this a little more regularly. We do have at least a couple fans. They may be family or friends, but they use us as their drive-in radio material in the morning to work. So we're going to try and stay back on top of doing this a little more. So we appreciate all the love.
Yeah, we're going to get back into our groove where we're doing the hour long. We're going to try and get some either returning guests or new guests on here. Like I said, our main goal is to get into an actual studio where we can just record this, not on any other software, but just record it in the same room.
And eventually maybe live stream stuff. So
yeah, live stream stuff. I know we were talking about the Alabama versus Florida game. Probably a little bit too long for a live stream, but maybe we'll do it by quarter type thing.
Maybe. So, but again, we appreciate all the love and appreciate all the people reaching out and, being interested in interacting and going on this journey with us. So, like he said, like, subscribe, comment, notification bell, all that stuff. That way you can keep up to date. So if we do get stuck in a lull like this, you're like, oh, they posted another video. We got it. So
yeah, like I said, we're going to try and push out some more content. But yeah, like, subscribe, comment down below what you'd like to see, what you don't like. If you don't like us,
which is plausible. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah, which is plausible. I mean, I know a lot of people that don't like me, so.
But I mean, again, we appreciate the viewership, and we'll
the support is awesome.
We'll catch you guys on the next one.